I was introduced to August Underground actually through toe tag. They recruited me to take pictures for a room work spread for August Underground. And Fred came over and popped in the first 5 minutes of August Underground for me to show me what I was in for. I was thinking, this is really great. I hope it's fake, because if not, then I'm in for it tonight. I think that August Underground's a very important part of horror. You see things in August Underground that you've never been exposed to before. It's very real. Like, my favorite part of it is the fact that the girl has feces on the chair, which is so realistic, because if you're tied up to a chair for that long, you're bound to shit yourself. But nobody has had the balls to show that until Fred. You feel sick, you feel dirty, you feel like you need to be cleansed after you watch August Underground. And it's absolutely great. August Underground couldn't be anything more. There's so much of an aura behind the whole August Underground that a lot of independent films, horror films in particular, don't have. It's a completely unique storyline, and it shows what horror can be in the future instead of this remake crap that's going on everywhere. It's disgusting. I think that August Underground, that a lot of young directors should watch it to see what can be done and to see what limits, the limits have to be pushed. We can't keep repeating the same crap over and over again. It's stagnant, and August Underground breathed the fresh air of life into it, so it's very important. Some people can't handle it and should never ever watch August Underground, and that's good. I like that about the film.
Found out about August Underground through a kid that I went to the Art Institute with. After school, like 2 years or something like that afterwards, I met up with him somehow. I just ran into him on the streets, and he was telling me, like, he wanted me to do some designs for him or whatever. And he was telling me about this movie that his friend made or someone made. I didn't really know what was going on. So I was like, hell yeah, man, I'll come over and watch a movie. He said it was scary, whatever. And this kid, like, the only reason why I hung out with him is because in his dorm room he had knives in the walls and, like, just, like, random crazy body parts and shit hanging around. So I'm like, fuck it, yeah, whatever. Went to his apartment, and, like, I hardly knew him, and so I walk in this little, small, smelly, hot apartment with weird lingerie and body parts, and it smelled really bad. It's a really odd apartment, and I don't know where the fuck is in the middle of the ghetto. And he pops in this movie, August Underground, and I start watching it thinking of a horror movie, and like, I'm just on the couch there by myself, just sitting there kind of watching this fucking massacre on the TV. It wasn't even a movie. It was like, it wasn't a fucking movie, man. It was, I don't know. I didn't know what the hell I was getting myself into. So anyway, I'm watching this fucking thing. Now, like, I'm just like, alright, man, about to have enough, Like, I don't know what he's about to do. I'm thinking, alright, I need to go catch a bus and get home. And then fucking, goddamn, someone comes over. And he opens up the door. It's fucking this goddamn giant. It's fucking Fred that's in this movie. I didn't know this kid, I didn't know any of these fucking people. I thought he was setting me up. I'm like, I haven't been scared. I don't get scared, and I got fucking freaked out. Like, well, I get scared of men, but not from movies and shit. But we've got Fred coming in through the door. He's like gigantic, It's like hovering over me. Oh, you're watching my stuff. Yeah. I thought he called him, like, setting me up. I thought I was gonna be fucking, woo, video camera, let's kill her. Finally, the fucking thing got over, thank God, and I'm just thinking, man, I need to get the fuck out of here. Like, I was fucking freaked out. I didn't know any of these fucking people, and this guy's all weird and shit, and, like, the movie gets over, and Fred's just sitting there. By then, he's sitting there on the couch with me, and I'm just like, oh, like, that's awesome, that's cool, that shit's like, is it real? Is it real? Like, I asked a stupid question. I knew, I'm like, I don't want to ask that, but I had to. And he didn't answer me, of course, and I never really fucking knew the answer until, like, I got to know the guys and just, made myself a part of Toe Tag because I loved it. I mean, that was an awesome movie. Props to Fred. That's a great fucking movie. It scared the shit out of me, and he scared the shit out of me. With the whole situation when I watched it the first time, it was a little too much, but I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I was so fucking scared, and I loved it. It's a fucking slap in the face with truth. You know, everyone's so used to being sugar-coated and happy little candy land, but it's fucking violent and rough, and fucking society will rape you and fucking hack you into pieces and eat your fucking flesh, you know, and then fucking spit it out on your mother. Thank fucking hell that there's August Underground, you know? I'm really glad that it's out there. And I'm really glad that, you know, August Underground, Mortem, and Penance. And I hope Penance is just the same, you know? Just to fucking punch people in the face. The truth. And I love it. And, yeah. I don't know. I can say a lot about it, but I'm all fucked up. Not too fucked up, I swear, Fred.
I was at Cinema Wasteland, probably 2002, 2003. Roger Watkins was here, and he was a Q&A. He was talking about Last House on Dead End Street. And Fred Vogel stood up and mentioned that he had made one of the most vile, disgusting movies of all time, and he wanted to know if Roger had any problems with distribution and all that good stuff. And then later on, after the talk was over, I spoke with Fred. Mentioned there are a couple companies that possibly would be interested in releasing it on DVD, and he ran through the movie. Hence, you know, a year goes by, Cinema Wasteland comes up again. A friend, Art Edinger, a friend of mine, Art Edinger, gave me a tape with both August Underground and Mortem on it. Took it home, watched both in one night, and my life has changed forever. The first 10 minutes into it, I remember pausing it, and I went up into the kitchen to get something to drink, and a part of me didn't even want to go back and watch it, but then I'm like, I have to sit through this. It's one of those train wrecks, like, oh, I gotta see this, and as I said, I just, kind of went through it, and it wasn't the easiest experience, but I did appreciate it, and since then I've seen it probably 5 or 6 times, and each time I always see something else that disturbs the heck out of me. How could these people be doing this? Wondering, or not really knowing who Fred Vogel is. Now that I know him, he's a great, nice guy, nice big teddy bear, but I was shocked to think that someone could actually act and do something like this, and just wondering what type of individuals these people were. I was a little bit dismayed in how I was able to watch it for the maybe 80 minutes or however long it was. I remember I wanted to email the person that gave me the tape, finding out a little history behind these people. But overall, it was shock, enjoyment, and probably most importantly, it was a good 80 minutes of entertainment. It was what I was thinking about was why am I sitting here watching this? Could I be spending time being more productive? Not one scene. I guess I've kind of seen it all. But definitely never saw anything like August Underground, though. I think the most important thing when it comes to any type of a genre is keep it moving. And August Underground is something, the movie, the people behind it, they're pushing the envelope. They're not going to be making the same types of movies, but it's something where someone has to stir things up, change the direction of horror, because right now there isn't anything going on in horror in the U.S., at least mainstream. So it's about time that there's a new movement, and it's definitely, the movie is going to be one of those movies that people are going to look back on, knowing that it changed kind of direction of present-day horror. I mean, we know this is a movie, but it's very difficult to watch because there are times where you actually think this could be happening. These are people that we hear stories about, disgusting individuals like this that do things like that. So it's something where you actually kind of find yourself thinking that scenes like this have happened, and could this be real? Nowadays on cable we watch these forensic shows and we see these disgusting images or these death books that we even sell at our table, and you see a movie like August Underground, it looks just like the real thing. And I don't know if it's something that we're desensitized to, but if we saw it in reality, we'd probably be much more shocked than when we see it on TV. But at the same time, if something like August Underground can shock people, I think that's definitely That's one of the things that seeing murder and just overall violence or sexual violence is meant to disturb, and it gets its point across. Being associated and knowing Toe Tag, going to Pittsburgh a couple times, hanging out with them. They're great, down-to-earth individuals, very hardworking, and they have a mission right now, and that is to make some of the most horrific movies. And knowing them as people now, they're going to do that because they have that drive to succeed.
I was in contact with Rod, the editor of Rue Morgue, and for the last few years prior to that, Rod and I had just developed kind of a friendship, and we would talk about the type of movies that Rod has very distinct, diverse taste, to where I think he kind of knows that I like stuff that maybe pushes envelopes and is maybe a bit more depraved than the average horror fan. So he had received the movie from Fred, and he just said, "Dude, I got this movie. It's so depraved, so sick, so over the top and realistic that it's almost unwatchable." And I was like, "Really? Right on. I want to check it out." And he's like, "Well, I'll tell you what. I'll put you in touch with a guy." So he gave me Fred's phone number and email, and I gave Fred a call, and right away we hit it off. We started talking, and from that point on, he had sent me a screener of the movie, and I remember watching it and just shaking my head. I mentally prepared myself and was just so rejoicing in the fact that I was going to see something that was pushing every envelope that had previously been sealed. It's so utterly realistic. It's like, for lack of a better comparison, it's what the Blair Witch Project should have been. It's supposed to be something that you're watching, but was not made for you in particular as a viewer to be seeing. So I thought it was very realistically done in the whole movie within a movie type of thing, especially after buying wholeheartedly and admittedly into the Blair Witch Project hype. I thought it was, from what I had read prior to it and all the hype, I totally bought into it and watched it. And to this day, I still think it's one of the biggest pile of fucking shit ever made. So, that being said, I think that Fred got that style of filmmaking right. And I couldn't believe how brutally, unflinchingly, just gory, sick, depraved, and just, it never let up. Once the murder started, I mean, it was just done so graphically, so realistically, and just, I hate to keep using the same word, depraved, but for me personally, that's, I thought it was one of the most depraved things I'd ever seen. I'm probably not one to, to look the other way, whatever. It made me grimace a little bit. It's like just looking inside of the mind of someone that is obviously went way off the deep end, and in his eyes, in Fred's eyes, as the character in the movie, there's nothing wrong with what he's doing. I think it's a subgenre within itself. I don't think you can, you could pinpoint it and say it's, mock snuff / exploitation / degradation or whatever. I think it's kind of created its own niche. It's taken elements of what I've just said and just really pushed it in terms of realism, in terms of just being the be-all end-all for that time period that it was made, for the budget that it was made for. Nothing can come close to that. So for me, I think it's just, it's untoppable for the idea that it was made a few years back, and for the budget that it was made. It's just brutally realistic and unflinchingly depraved. It's like anything else that's been there, whether it's the first Dracula movie or the first werewolf movie or whatever. This is the first movie shot on video that actually can pull it off, because it's you're not supposed to be seeing what you're seeing. And I've seen other movies. I don't know if I should mention names, but I've you know, well, I mean, I'm entitled to my opinion. You know, prior to August Underground, I had heard about a film called Scrapbooking, and I watched it, and some of the acts in it were, you know, certainly sick and whatever, but I just thought, does it hold up? No, it doesn't. I was bored out of my fucking mind after, 20 minutes. I was wondering why I was watching it. No offense to anyone involved in that. It's my opinion, but I just think that, for all the hype that was created around that, that's nothing compared to August Underground. So I think that in 50 years, this movie still stands alone as, the first one that was legitimately shot on video that can have an impact within, the horror genre. I'm not and have never been a fan of anything shot on video unless it's my niece's birthday party. So for me to legitimately take in and get in a mood while watching the movie, just to get myself in that frame of mind, even though I know it's a movie, but just to sit there and grimace at the scenes happening, that tells something about A, the effects, B, the idea behind it, the conviction to make such, a movie. I mean, when everyone else was worried about doing remakes and trying to make their shitty film look bigger than what it was, he was smart enough to sit down and say, look, I know what I can do, I know what I can accomplish, but I'm going to do it better than everyone else, and he succeeded. The people that I've showed it to, all pretty much have the same reaction that probably everyone else that's on this has had. I've been in hotel rooms with people and parties and showed it, and you get girls, swearing, saying that, too much, that you're sick for even watching it. Why do you even want to do this? This isn't horror. This isn't whatever. This is garbage. This is the sickest thing I've ever seen. I've had, seen arguments break out between couples because, the guy will like it and the girl is repulsed by it. So, I've seen many people walk out, but that's nothing new. That's a general reaction, especially, like I said, now there has been press on it and it's achieved somewhat of a cult status, but when you show it to someone who, has no idea going into it, ultimately their reaction is either they're going to turn their head or they're going to leave the room or they're going to be extremely repulsed. I've got a real problem personally with anything, to give you an example, Silo, 120 Days of Sodom, anything involving shit, so that pretty much says it all. The girl is sitting there in her own shit in it, and the toe scene in itself was pretty pretty fucking, pretty gnarly. I asked Fred at one point if he still had the toe because I wanted it.
Well, I was looking to cast some special effects guys for a murder set, and I got a phone call from a friend of mine named Rod Godino. He is the owner of Rue Morgue magazine out of Toronto, Canada. And he said, Nick, man, you gotta check this movie out that I saw. I think it's right what you're looking for. It's right up your alley, and I don't want to tell you too much about it. I just want to send you the tape, and you tell me what you think. But it's a one-off. I've never seen anything like it. So I was waiting for the tape. It came in and kicked everybody out of the house and shut the lights down and checked it out. First of all, it was a breath of fresh air in the horror genre. It was quite exciting. It stimulated me in a way that I had not been stimulated in a long time. I knew I was watching something special in about the first 60 seconds of this movie, and it kept my attention all the way out, and it was really something else. I thought I was watching a documentary. To see these two guys take this woman and do what they do to her, it really was, it was horrific, but I couldn't take my eyes off of it. It was done so well. It looked like a documentary, like I said, and it looked like a real snuff film, and just incredible. A great ending. I don't think it could have ended in a better way. It ended the way I was hoping it would end, so I liked it. The camera just pretty much just turns off right in the middle of this chase scene, and you can just only imagine what's going to happen next. The second time I watched it, I was with a good friend of mine that I thought that he would be able to take the film, and he did, and he's the only person I thought that could deal with it. And he was mesmerized. He didn't say a word through the whole film. And I think when it was over, he said something to the effect of, Jesus Christ. I loved it. I was in heaven. I hadn't seen anything like that since Bill Lustig's Maniac. It captivated me. I just thought it was incredible, really. It was disturbing and scary all at the same time. It's one of the 10 most powerful horror films I've ever seen. I mean, I think it's brilliant. It was conceived a certain way, and it was executed the way that it was conceived, which is so difficult to do. And I think it's a masterpiece of horror, actually. The director is different than other horror filmmakers, so you got to give kudos to Fred Vogel. Second, it's just a balls-to-the-wall, realistic, in-your-face, confrontational horror film that doesn't pull any punches and doesn't play any games and doesn't promise something that it cannot deliver. It's what horror films should be, pretty much, to sum it up. I mean, it is a horrific movie, and Fred Vogel did what he set out to do. It's not often that you, excuse me, watch a film that delivers what it promises. And you know, murder is not a glamorous thing like Hollywood portrays. Murder is disgusting, and it's sickening, and it's gruesome. And August Underground shows murder what it really is. I've done a lot of research on serial murder, and I can imagine serial murderers watching this and say, you know what, this reminds me of something I did before. I hired Toe Tag Pictures to come out to Las Vegas to shoot murder set pieces. Jeremy Cruz and Fred Vogel are simply the best special makeup effects artists in the world. And of course, Fred is a very talented director in his own right. But what I remember most from murder set pieces, I think, is, I'll tell you this one story where we forgot some of the props, some of the weapons, and we had to go outside to retrieve them from the vehicle. And Fred and Jeremy were covered in blood, and they were carrying some weapons that we broke on the set. And somehow someone must have seen them and called the police, because it didn't seem but a minute, and cops were screaming, guns were pointed, and I remember looking at Fred and Jeremy on the on the ground, face down, with guns pointed at them, and I'm thinking, you know what, man, I'm sorry about that.
I heard about it just, there was a few events that happened. I think someone in Pennsylvania got arrested for making some kind of violent porn movie or something like that, and I thought maybe that was this. And I kept hearing about a lot of incidents that were similar to Duck, with a kind of controversy over these filmmakers making this movie that was way over the top, and kind of the guinea pig thing kind of came in, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. So that's how I heard of the August Underground, and I couldn't really find it anywhere at first. When I first heard about it, it wasn't everywhere, which it is now, embedded in all of our minds and our video collections, hidden back behind our porn and stuff. I like the presentation of the video cassette. I like how when you open it up, there's no labels on it. It doesn't describe, it doesn't say this is a movie, it's just like, this is terrible shit. It almost looks like some kid put it together because he found, you know, got this on the internet or found this videotape, and he just threw this weird cover together, you know. But the videotape itself is completely blank, which leads you to believe, it's like, well, what's this? You know, it's like, many times it's actually, I'm such a slob when it comes to DVDs and CDs and videos. I pull them out of the case and I leave them out, and I don't have them all marked or anything, you know? So this damn thing, like, every once in a while, like, I have to find out, like, what's on here, and I'm gonna tape over it. Oh, geez, Matt, sorry, I didn't want to show, you know, the wife that, you know, it's, like, very disturbing, but that, I just felt like I was in for it again, you know? It's like, this is gonna be trouble. You know, it's, I don't know, man, I made these, you know, goofy little snuff movies, and obviously I didn't really pay as much attention to the detail. But what this film reminds me of is kind of like when Peter Sotos used to get flack for writing his stories, and they used to think that there's no way this guy could write this without it being real. And when you watch the August Underground, even just from the beginning of the film, you're like, if you don't know you guys, you're a bunch of teddy bears, a bunch of lovely guys. But if you don't know you people, you'd think that they just really, you know, oh God, these people really hate human beings. It's just, because it's torture in a sense to even watch it. You know, to sit down and hang out. It's like, sure, it's funny and there's great special effects and everything, but if you just run into these features with, okay, this is like a horror movie, and you sit down and watch it, and it's not. It's like a performance piece, and it's part of the fun, I guess, of watching these movies is to see how far you can let your nerves go and you can take it. I think August Underground fits into horror through the new wave of horror, which really has been kind of creeping up to us, but it's a different kind of horror. It's not really about monsters, and it's more about emotions and anxiety. And I think that's what our society is heading towards anyway. I think we're becoming very anxious people. And also, a lot of the great monster horror stuff that we grew up with when we were kids that we totally love, just doesn't affect us the way it did, when we were 5 years old. It's believe it or not, it's more of an adult horror film kind of concept to try and pull off. It's much easier, I think, to write a silly story about some zombies that come up out of the graves and shoot people up, but it's much more difficult to deal with, like how we can deal with this realism of how do we make our friend here look like they're actually being accosted or murdered, and how far do we go with it, and how realistic can we get with it, and how much torture can we put into it, It's kind of like if you were, making a movie beating a cat in the head, it would be so hard because you love cats. I'm sure you love cats, unless you have allergies. But, it's like, it's almost like hard to even think about it, like hard to even write the general idea. So in that sense, I think it's really cool that the August Underground film could really get into and explore these like very long, drawn out, almost real time chunks of just harrowing terror and anxiety and howling madness and people screaming and But it's kind of nasty because you're definitely causing people trouble when you sit down and watch it. It's like here's a roller coaster ride, but it's broken. So we don't really know if your car is going to fall off or not, because we don't know, like how you're going to sit in the seat. But we'll, and everybody's seat's different, so we'll see. It's good. I think it stands out because it is so real, and I think it challenges the horror film crowd so much. August Underground rivals what I call North Philly Live. It's about it's a porno kind of, but it's a bunch of crack whores in Philly. That the guy in the beginning has a bag on his head and he's like, I made this movie because I need drugs, and they all like shit themselves and eat it and throw up and eat it. It rivals that. It's that gross.
I found out about August Underground. Actually, it's probably a pretty typical story in Rue Morgue magazine. More because I'm friends with Mike Watt, who wrote the article about August Underground that was in there, and so I saw he had an article in there, and it was like, oh, let's see what Mike's up to. He usually got good stuff going on, so I checked it out, and was like, oh, okay, this sounds like something I should see. So that's where I first heard about it. Once I read about it, and it started absorbing what was in that article. I'll be honest, at first, I didn't want to like it. I was like, there was this part of me that was just like, even though the article's really explicit about talking about how Fred's a good guy, and has quotes about Fred, and how he treated his actors and all this stuff, part of me wanted to think that was all horseshit, and that it was, oh, this horror sunk to this level, there's no story, there's no actors, it's just snuff. And then, but once I got it, I watched it, and the funny story with me watching it is I had been sick and had been in the hospital, and they'd give me pain medication to take, so I was at home, and I'd gotten a bootleg of it through trading, of course, because in the early days that was the only way anyone was seeing it. Fred didn't have it out yet, and so people were trading them back and forth, and so I'm laying in bed, and I'm like, I'm gonna pop this fucker in, what's this all about? And I'm nodding in and out, watching it, and it's the most surreal, dreamlike experience, and and the scenes don't happen in a narrative order in the movie, and and then I'm sort of not quite there, and it flipped me out. I was like, no, this works, man. I'm like, I suddenly am like, and I still didn't want to like it. I put it in still thinking, no, it's just gonna be more guinea pig shit, it's just that. And then I'm looking at it and I'm like, no, they obviously took a real fucking lot of time to make this look like it's amateur and it's just guys, you know. And so I dug it, but the problem was, like, the next day I only remembered bits because of the pain medication. I'm like, were they in a convenience store in that movie? And were there in what was that train station shit? And so I watched it again like a week later, and it really, I was convinced that, you know, okay, Fred Vogel's not fucking around. So I was pretty, pretty startled by how realistic it was. The effects in that movie are fucking tremendous, and that's really one of the, and the tremendous, and the, they're like continuous takes and all this other shit that is really hard to do together. And I think that's something people don't think about is, I mean, they think gore, splash some blood around and it's done, but the gore in this movie is not like that. I mean, it's realistic and it's so sustained. That opening sequence especially, it's just so sustained. It just keeps hitting and hitting and hitting and hitting, and so it's intense. It works. I mean, I'm sure everybody talks about the brutality of it and the gore and the violence and the aggressiveness and all of that, which is very important. But I think that it through, and I don't know how improv the movie was. I know I'm sure it was to a certain extent, but even through that, it seems to me that the people on screen, Fred, and then once you get to Mortem, the other two characters, have a pretty clear idea of who those characters are. And I feel that the movies give you a really terrifying, but very clear viewpoint of who would do this. I mean, and what they're about, and so that's what gets to me watching the movies. It's the gore. I'm pretty seasoned on that stuff, but it's the attitude of the film that comes through. I mean, I'm a horror filmmaker myself. I'm a purist in this stuff. I mean, I'm into the aggressive stuff as much as the next guy, but there is a fine line to where you're celebrating actual human agony and suffering and debauchery, and then it's a fine line. And I know as me as a filmmaker, I don't want to do that on accident. And reading about it, when I stress reading about August Underground, that's what it sounded like. It sounded like, the quotes they were using from Fred were kind of horse shit, that it was really just celebrating, all of this madness and murder and rape. But then when you see the movie, it isn't, but it's not clearly not. I think it takes a certain amount of intelligence to grasp that it isn't. Because you have to grasp that the movies have no moral viewpoint. The movie does, but the characters don't. And we as Americans aren't used to that. We don't get, characters without a moral focal point. And these guys don't have one. There's no moral compass. But by doing that, by its very nature, it defines itself in saying, this is the human animal at its most base, and this is what goes on. You're confronted with it. This is human nature at its worst. And I think if when the movie's over, if you turn it off and you're not feeling really fucked up in the pit of your gut, maybe you need to reflect on yourself a little bit. I actually have never watched it like on my own with friends. My friends like horror movies, but a lot actually, but even that one's a little too much for them. So, but I did watch it with a crowd at Cinema Wasteland last year, and there was some great shit that happened in that one. When this older couple from a wedding comes stumbling in and sat right in front of me, and I was with some friends of mine that worked on my last film. And they were, huge fans of these movies too. And we just didn't end up watching the movie. We watched these people for the next 5 minutes, and as they squirmed, and and surprisingly, the old lady wasn't all that fazed, but the guy was like, we gotta go. And then that was the same screening where, the door opened, and there was a couple of yuppies that were obviously very drunk, and with kids, and Fred became fucking Superman and come diving out of the dark, landing in front of them going, no, the kids don't need to see this. So that was cool. I mean, it's such an underground, it's a buried underground piece, and I was actually talking to Fred a little bit about this earlier, and it's like, he was talking about, you know, he doesn't want it in Best Buy, and I kind of see his point, you know, it's sort of, it's like, not unlike Necromantic, or Necromantic being a good example, it's like, it almost should exist on the outer edge of horror, because, you know, the mainstream horror is never going to be influenced by something like this. They're going to be, you know, they're not going to look at it at all. If they do look at it, you know, you're going to have the Charlie Sheen guinea pig incident, you know. But for the people who really care about it, the people who are into this stuff and want, you know, the most extreme terrorizing experience, it's probably akin to getting, you know, their first Jack Ketchum novel or something, you know, where it's like, you know, here we go, this is it. It's like raw experience, you know, in your face, kicking your teeth down your throat. And, you know, so I think that it's going to be down the road. There's going to be people, you know, really respect it and talk. I mean, they do now, but favorably about it. I think you're going to see, you know, books written about when video started being used as a real tool for filmmaking. I think this movie will be pointed at. It'll be, you know, at some point, someone is going to realize, and I think people realize it a little bit, that right now, you know, especially with the rise of digital filmmaking, but with video filmmaking in general, that it wasn't all backyard auteurs, you know, playing with their dad's camcorder in the backyard. There was a good, solid movement, you know, disassociated from each other in some ways, that, you know, pushed the envelope and pushed the medium and pushed what could be done and what could be accepted. And I think in 50 years, you're going to see, you know, August Underground's going to be one of the main movies in that. You know, there's going to be 4 or 5 of them. I'm sure it's going to be one that people will point at and go, you know, this one was part of a new wave. And I also think people will point at it and go, you know, as far as the fake snuff movie, you know, subgenre, because there are lots of them, it's going to be the definitive one. I mean, obviously. Man, Fred's a good guy. And that's the, you know, it's a truism of a lot of this shit, a lot of this stuff in the underground, but, you know, you see it and you're like, what a, you know, especially about regular, like, horror fan. Like, let's, for instance, say, at a convention, somebody picks up August Underground, they've heard the hype or whatever, but they don't know much about it. They don't know toe tag. So they pick it up and they see Fred in that, and they're like, you know, he's a fucking monster. You know, he's a fucking brutal monster. His character, even if his character wasn't a serial killer, he'd still be a dick. You know, he's still not somebody you'd want to know. And then you meet Fred, man, and he's this fucking, you know, soft-spoken, enthusiastic guy that, you know, he's so just, you know, champion, not just him, man, I mean, just, you know, anything that he seems to really love, and I just think we need so much more of that in this area of filmmaking, you know. Even if I didn't like these films, and I do, I think I would still, you know, want to champion Fred Vogel as a filmmaker, because he's got that enthusiasm. You know, he's not in it to play filmmaker. He's not in it to get fucked, and he's not in it to go find somebody who's going to let him snort cocaine and party, and, you know, he's in it because he loves doing this. And, you know, that's what we need. We need more of it. One of my favorite films of all time, and I believe Fred's too, is Last House on Dead End Street. And it was, you know, in recent years that that movie was a mystery for years. You know, no one knew who made it or whatnot. And of course, it came out that it was Roger Watkins. In fact, I was the first person to interview Roger Watkins when he, you know, showed up, and we became instantly friends with him. And Fred's obviously, you know, talked to him, became instantly friends with him. And he's another passion guy like that. You know, it's from his, it's real and from his gut. But Roger Watkins said that, you know, there are only, you know, 2 films that matter that have come out of this generation, and of those 2 films, it was August Underground and my own film, The Mutilation Man. And I thought that was pretty fucking high praise. So to have one of my own heroes, you know, name check my film, and then I'm sure it's the same thing for Fred. And this was before Fred and I knew each other. So it's like when we finally met, we're like, dude, you're the other guy. So I thought that was pretty awesome.
I go into Incredibly Strange Video one day in Pittsburgh, which is where I now live, And the owner of the store, Bruce Lenz, tells me that there's this new movie that these kids brought in. And it's like a simulated snuff movie, he says, consisting of found footage, supposedly. And it's not like other shot-on-video films. He said it's really nasty, really disgusting. He asked me if I was interested in seeing it. He said he'd ask the director if he could show it to me. So I go in the store the next day. I have a friend with me from out of town who hasn't seen a ton of horror movies. And we start watching the movie right in the video store. We watch the first 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, probably less. But all that I remember about that very first glimpse of the movie was that however much of the film we saw, I felt like I'd been watching it for an hour. I mean, it seemed like it was much longer than it was. It was very intense, very realistic. I liked how there were no cutaways, and I couldn't wait to get home and watch the whole thing. So went home, watched the whole thing, one of the very first people who actually saw the movie, and I was blown away by it. I was absolutely blown away by it. I thought it was one of the best usage is a video, because a lot of movies now are senselessly being shot on video. This movie was actually shot on video for a purpose. It was a high concept movie that worked. I loved the ending especially. I thought it was a very interesting way to shape it into a linear film, and I fell for a hook, line, and sinker. I really liked it. And for me, it was a fun movie because confrontational horror is really my favorite kind of horror. I look for it, I seek it out, I don't find much of it. I really enjoyed it. We had a guest with us. I watched it with my girlfriend. She also watched it all the way through. Our guest, though, had some hard times with it. He left the room a couple times, and he was saying, I can't believe I'm watching this, that kind of thing. Well, when it was over, my very first instinct was, I want to meet these guys, I hope they're not psychopaths. I'm going to meet them in a public place. And I set up a meeting with them as soon as I could. Because I write for a magazine. I'm the managing editor of Ultraviolent magazine. And I had to meet these guys. They were a local group of people making a amazing film. At my fingertips, I could meet them, so that's what I went ahead and did. Met them right away. I met Fred Vogel and Alan Peters at the same time, the two people who created the film. And I thought they were really interesting. My first meeting with them was honestly a little bit awkward. It was comfortable talking with them, but Alan Peters was obviously becoming uncomfortable with August Underground, and he was asking me a lot of questions. He found out that I was a public defender and I was an attorney, and he was asking me all these questions. Like, he thought somehow he'd get in trouble for the film, which was ridiculous. August Underground is a confrontational horror film. Confrontational horror films basically began in the early 70s with Last House on the Left. Different horror movies seek to achieve different things. Some seek to shock, some seek to scare, some seek to gross you out. August Underground is just a mean movie. Its main purpose is to make you feel bad. It achieves that purpose. Yes, it uses the gimmick of video and found footage, and some people have given it a genre title separate from confrontational horror, but to me it's just another example, the natural extension of confrontational horror. I think that in 50 years, August Underground, the original August Underground, which I think it's very unfortunate that Mortem was released first, I think the original August Underground has the potential to be considered a great film, at least in the canon of confrontational horror. I mean, a lot of the great confrontational horror films to date are still not considered as great as they are. People don't walk around, the average horror fan doesn't walk around saying, I Spit on Your Grave is one of the greatest horror films ever made. It is. It's a better film than the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it's not considered as such by the average horror fan. Not to put down the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I don't know where that came from, because that's obviously one of the greatest horror films of all time, too. But August Underground has the potential to be considered a great confrontational horror film. August Underground's Mortem has caused so many waves and has such a cult following already that I think it's not going to be forgotten. I think that some people might consider that a great film in some way, or at least a notorious film. These films might be considered a little bit of a sign of the times and a sign of the digital video boom, but I think they're going to be remembered as some of the more creative shot-on-video films. I think the original August Underground is one of the very best shot-on-video films I've seen. I've only seen a handful of other shot-on-video films that I really liked. So, what makes August Underground stand out from other independent horror films is mainly two aspects of it. Number one, movies are being shot on video now by and large. People are too lazy and too cheap to shoot on film. 16mm is cheap as hell to shoot on. People don't do it anyway. Video sucks. Video is not film. Video is basically a useless medium, but occasionally a film will come along, such as Games People Play New York, Zero Day, or August Underground, where video has a purpose to the storytelling. If this movie is supposed to be the found footage of serial killers aren't going to own a film camera, they're going to own a video camera. And so they use video as a part of the story, making it very unique. Of those 3 movies I mentioned, this is the only true genre movie. Those other movies are genre related, but August Underground has to be the most straightforward, best use of video to tell a found footage type story. I think the other thing that sets it apart is it's a confrontational horror movie in an age when confrontational horror movies aren't being made all that much anymore. So those are the 2 main things that set it apart. It's using video for a purpose, and it's being a confrontational horror movie in 2001 or whatever year it was made. I believe 2001, I could be wrong. The best experiences I had watching August Underground, I actually never showed it to friends. Without Fred's permission, I made a few dubs of it and sent it to people who I knew early on before the movie took off. And so I would exchange emails with some of my friends who really liked the movie. I turned Tony Simonelli on to August Underground. I was the first person to send it to him. And now Tony Simonelli, of course, is producing the new toe tag film, The Red Sun Towers. But my best experiences watching August Underground with groups are actually right here at the Cinema Wasteland convention. Multiple times over the years, this movie has been screened at impromptu screenings in rooms, and watching people watch the movie is almost as enjoyable as watching the movie itself. I mean, I've seen people with just glazed looks on their faces, and one time, it had gotten a little old. I'd already watched the movie twice in one weekend. Excuse me. They were showing it a 3rd time. I said, look, I can't watch August Underground again. So I'm walking down the hall, actually with Christy of Toe Tag, and I hear someone just screaming in a room, and I stop to listening because, it's interesting when someone's screaming. And it's this woman going off on Fred. This girl watched August Underground, and it pissed her off. I mean, and she went off on him about, why would you make a movie like that? Well, I mean, it wasn't the stereotypical, oh, this is misogynistic. She just thought it was brutal for the sake of being brutal. It made her cry. She was crying and she was screaming at him, and that was entertaining as hell, just to see that this movie had that kind of impact on someone. It wasn't quite the knee-jerk reaction type opinion either, where she was just like, oh, this is offensive and stupid. I mean, she was really upset by the movie, and it was very interesting to see her get so animated in attacking Fred about the film. So that was interesting. Other times I've seen people watch the movie and just be like, this is great. Other times I've seen people watch it and be like, I don't get it, I don't like it. But it's always interesting to watch it with a group.
I found out about August Underground through Art Edinger of Ultraviolet magazine. It really moves you right into the film with a big boom, with a huge impact. It has a very cinema verite, very realistic feeling, because you're outside to start, you're watching this guy, with a beer and sort of just talking to himself in the camera, and then you go right into this intense scene of horror. And the acting is very, very convincing. I really felt like these were just a couple of guys that I knew, and that this could be real. And the effects, of course, are amazing, so that adds to the reality factor. The camera never flinches, you don't have any cuts, so I really felt like they had done a great job, and it was really super convincing. Well, I think it's a very unique piece. I think it has a lot of intersections with video and confrontational filmmaking, and a push for more reality and sort of less mannered, stylized impulses. So I think it does a lot of things. It does the basics that horror works on people. It's definitely really visceral, scary, gory, impactful, but it also plays around with a lot of modern concepts like found footage, things that could be real and are even more frightening, because there is some sort of film out there, like the case in Canada with the Tammy Homolka. They did film their killings. They did do that. So playing around with that, I think, is pretty powerful. So that's how I feel it fits into horror. Well, I think that there, in our entire society, and in even horror fans, a certain percentage or certain amount of them, I think there's always a certain point where people like to look away and like to have a break from the real horror of a situation. And I feel like, confrontational horror, films like August Underground, push you to get past your limits and push you to understand the cruelty and violence that is actually really prevalent in our society. And I think it's good. I think it's a good tactic.
I was working at a video store at the time, and Fred Vogel came in with Alan Peters at the time, and they I think they'd either just started filming or they just completed. I wasn't sure which it was. Actually, I believe I met Alan first, and he was telling me about the project, and I saw the movie. It actually took me 2 tries to get all the way through it because it's a disturbing. It's a really hard movie to watch. It's not a trip in the park at all. And then I met Fred. That's how it was. I saw the movie and then I met Fred, and I was actually a little disturbed by it because he seemed like a nice guy. But my impression was all the way through because the movie is very realistic. That I couldn't get the image of the killer out of my head with the guy I was talking to the entire time. And then I interviewed him for one of our local newspapers. I did a piece on him for Film Thread, and I did a piece on him for Rue Morgue magazine. And I've just been a big supporter of, especially the first film. I believe that the first film in particular is it is its own piece. It's very well thought out. It's very well done. Very well scripted. You actually feel like it's an improv film, and but it's not. It's scripted all the way through. Everything's planned out. They were planning on doing this little, I don't know if it was a publicity stunt or what, we're going to make a brick of VHS tapes and start leaving them on subways and trains so that people would think this was real found footage, thinking it's a snuff film type of thing, and which I said is not a really good idea because it was so well done, and it does feel that a lot of the things in there could have been real. But it is, what struck me was that it isn't just killing wall to wall, which a lot of independent filmmakers make that mistake. I like the fact that it's 2 killers on vacation in the middle of the film. That they're shooting whatever's around them, which made it very, very realistic, and it heightened the tension all the way through. So I was impressed by the structure of it and the seeming non-structure of it, because the first kill happens so quick and then nothing happens for a while. And you're just waiting for what's the next thing, and they run into people they don't kill through the movie too, which is. Just makes you that much more uncomfortable. So I was just impressed by the entire process of it. You don't have time to react. Actually, you're still processing because they're not introduced. It is like a found footage film. There was no credits on the part that I watched, so you're taking it in. And I knew the premise of the movie, so I was sort of prepared for what was going to happen somewhere, but I wasn't prepared for it to happen that quickly. And I felt horrible for the actresses involved. Actors and actresses. He doesn't give any gender a real break in this thing. He's just as nasty to one as the other. And Annie, I think Annie is the first victim. Your heart goes out to her because that was her first film role. she's tied to a chair with a bag over her head or something all the way through, and it's just awful. You just feel so bad for everyone involved, and they're playing characters who's taking utter delight in torturing these people, and it's hard to wrap your head around it. You just sort of sit there, I don't want to say numb and evoke the cliche of it, but you're sort of getting back into the reality of it, because you know what you're seeing is fiction, because obviously Fred's walking around not in prison. But it's a real testament to both his skills and Alan's skills as a filmmaker that they created something that you can believe is real. So it takes you a while to get back into seeing the daylight and the pretty colors again. It's not, I don't classify it as a serial killer film because they're not serial killers. They're impulse murderers, which is a big distinction that not a lot of indie filmmakers make. It's too easy to call it a serial killer film. It's a brutal it's a brutal psychological hammer to the forehead in a lot of ways. It's not structured as a movie, obviously. I think they've sort of created their own genre, split off. I mean, it's I've heard it referred to as sort of a Blair Witch ripoff when it first came out, which it isn't at all. It is its own thing. Other people have tried doing the home movie horror before. It doesn't usually come apart. You can tell that it's rehearsed. The acting usually isn't that good. It's the brutality that Fred and Alan and the victims all portray that sets it apart as a real. It's an important piece of independent filmmaking. It really is, and I think it's sort of in a class to itself. It hasn't been equaled even by them. It was such an underground thing for the long time, and now it's getting an official DVD release. So it'll be interesting that it's getting a wider audience now. So many people have seen it. I think that the fact that people have talked about it for a couple of years now, it might lessen the impact, but I don't see how it could, because it really is a brutal little movie. It'll be on a lot of people's top 10, 15 lists of most disturbing movies of all time. Again, it's a cliche, but I think it's going to be up there somewhere. My favorite set piece of the whole thing is where the cameraman sets the camera down, and he does it in such a way that you see the reflection in the television screen. And that's the only moment, and it's simply because I'm schooled in the language of filmmaking, to hit another cliche, but that's when I realized that it was planned out. But it's a beautiful shot. It seems like it's so accidental that they just accidentally caught their reflections, and that's when you know that these guys knew what they were doing. And I think that because they planned it, they tried to be professional, even down to the bad focus pull, which is obviously very deliberate all the way through. They knew exactly what movie they wanted to make all the way through it. So that's what makes it stand across. Well, that amount of professionalism is what sets it apart. The murders are not that graphic in August Underground. It's the approach that the killers take. It's the manner of which everyone is killed. They're tortured, and you have no trouble believing that this could actually happen. They seem like guys that you live next door to if you live in a kind of a crummy neighborhood. There's nothing that gives it away that this is a bunch of kids doing a movie. It's very well paced. It's very well done. And the brutality comes through, and we can live in an ugly world. And if we don't pay attention to the surroundings, if we're not looking over our shoulder, things like this can't happen. I was uncomfortable throughout most of it, particularly because I had received Annie's headshot before I saw the film. So I was equating the victim in the movie to this woman's headshot that I had. And so it was more uncomfortable than it was just I can't take it anymore. Because you're just being hammered left and right, and then you have the passages where they're at the roadside America. It's a real mind twister in a lot of ways.
That was tough. I was like, I don't know if I really want to watch this, but I kept up with it, and every scene I kept saying, I don't know if I really want to watch this, but I like the way it's just a normal film at first. It's just two guys just kidding around, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, I got a surprise, and if I didn't know anything about it, it would have really, really shocked me. I mean, I kind of figured what was coming, but it was still shocking. It was just filthy and disgusting and disturbing, but it was well done disturbing. It wasn't just gross out disturbing. I think the graininess really helped that too. You couldn't really make things out, and I really like that. It's really gritty, it's very disturbing. It doesn't show, hey, these guys are gonna go out and be killers, and it's, let's cheer for the killers. I mean, you really felt scared by these guys. If you saw them on the street, you would really... It took me a while after that, when I met Fred again, to really, look him in the face. It was a very strange thing there.
How did I find out about August Underground? A little tape showed up in the mail at Rue Morgue one day, a red clamshell with no label on it, with the sort of had this very found object quality. It appeared at the office, and curiously we opened it, put it in, watched it, and found ourselves a little snuff movie. A little wannabe snuff movie. The only people I watched August Underground with was the Rue Morgue crew at the office in our screening room, and they slowly got up one by one and left the room. After the first 15 minutes, Mary Beth got up and left, and then I think 5 minutes later, Gary left, and then at some point Rod left, and I was the only person, still waiting around to the end to see what happens at the end of the movie. It is very anticlimactic because it just sort of ends, but it works for the movie because the idea is it's not a movie. The idea is that it's just a collection of footage that these serial killers have shot. So it actually works. The fact that the movie just stops and doesn't really there's no real ending to it at all. It took me a little while to digest what I was seeing, and at first, of course, I was a little offended by it, and I immediately wanted to dismiss it as just pornography and valueless cinema. But after I thought about it for a while, mulled it over, I realized it has a real place in the genre. I mean, it follows in the footsteps of the Mondo Cane films and all the other sort of like faux snuff films that came before August Underground. It's not the first movie to try to do something like this, but I'd like to say it's probably the most successful film, faux snuff film there is. Well, naturally, because of the subject matter of the film, it's appalling at first, but once you get past the initial shock of what you're seeing and really look at the film, you come to appreciate an artistry to it, because there is a real verisimilitude in the quality of the special effects. I mean, they really look real. So most people are unable to get past the aberrance of what they're seeing in order to get at the real gold of what this film is. What makes it stand out is, well, quite obviously it's probably one of the goriest films ever made, so that in and of itself makes it stand out, but the quality of the gore is what is most important, I think, because Fred and the toe tag production guys are just so extraordinarily gifted, and they, I mean, when you can take something and that's fake and make it look real, that's art. Whether or not it's offensive, disgusting, whatever, that's irrelevant when it comes to art. And there's a real question about whether this movie ever even needed to be made, because there's a very small fraction of the viewing audience, even genre public, that want to see this kind of movie. It definitely, it kind of falls through the cracks of the mainstream audience, that's for sure, but it exists in the underground, and that's kind of the place it needs to be. It was born of the underground. It's sort of marketed to people as if it were real. You're supposed to put this movie in and watch it and think that you've picked up a videotape that a couple of serial killers have lost somewhere. So it belongs in the underground, but that's okay, because underground horror cinema is fantastic. The film has a notoriety. It's popular getting popular because of its notoriety, because it's virtually unwatchable. We called it the most unwatchable film, and so those movies are always going to have some currency because of their notoriety. They will continue to endure. August Underground works on that same level that when I was a teenager, and I'd heard about like the Faces of Death movies, or the Guinea Pig movies, or Cannibal Holocaust, Cannibal Ferox, those movies, and you'd heard rumors of them that no one could ever procure a copy of it, and then and they were supposedly real, and oh, my brother's brother got a copy from somewhere, and you put it in and you watched it and you were elated by the fact that you felt like you were doing something forbidden just by watching the film. And that right there is August Underground's main sell. That's why that film works. Fred Vogel is probably one of the nicest, sweetest teddy bears I've ever met in my entire life, yet he makes the most vilest, putrefying, disgusting cinema there is. So the guy's a walking dichotomy.
I heard about a pretty crazy film that had been filmed, and that was going to be like a mock snuff film, and that I heard that the maker of the film, and I don't know how much of it was rumor, but was going to leave these tapes around. And then when people found them, they would think it would be a real snuff film, and then it would cause a media, crazy media blitz. And then he would come to admit that, hey, it's, and prove that it's fake. And I thought, well, I got to meet this guy. I think it's a brilliant idea. It's basically taking it to the next, the next level. I mean, film is it's very tough for film to be threatening nowadays. We've seen it all. So that's why I knew I just had to see this film. It's funny, my expectations were so high, and I finally got to meet Fred, and he had some VHS copies of it. So I purchased it, and I took it home, and I thought, I've seen it all. So I was already like, come on, try to impress me. I've seen everything there is to see. I put the film in and started watching it, and never in my life was I so horrified and almost appalled, but in a good way. I mean, it was very, 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 it worked. It was convincing. It looked every bit the part. Nothing could even prepare me for the opening sequence. Right straight through to the end of the film, I was fully blown away. I knew that I had seen a modern masterpiece, if you will, because honestly, there's just nothing out there like it. So it was definitely a breakthrough film. It may have taken me a couple watchings to sit through the whole thing and not completely have to take a shower afterwards. I thought, well, now this is going to stick with me for about 3 or 4 weeks, and I'm basically going to have to live with this. It was definitely that effective of a film. It definitely left its mark on me. Some of the images, well, obviously I still don't have them out of my head. That stuff happens every day, and I mean, as a society, I don't know if there was any intention to make it a social commentary, but I will say this, this happens every day, this type of brutality, and we look at it almost as if it's television lives. Like, we just kind of wash it off as if it's no big deal. Like, even when Waco, Texas happened, it's like, 90 some odd lives were lost, and everyone was like, those freaks got what they deserved. It's kind of like, you see it on the news, you hear it, but you don't really feel it. When you see a film like August Underground and it becomes so apparent and real to you, I think it has a tendency to shed a little bit more light on what's actually going down. So I honestly think it's an important film, and I think they should make everyone watch it, especially soccer moms in Middle America. Should have to see this. It should be mandatory. I think definitely in the genre, it's kind of making its own new mark, but I think it also has its sort of nostalgic value, in the sense that there was a lot of like rape revenge movies that were going on, in the 70s, and honestly, I mean, this had such an unhappy, it didn't really end. That's the whole point of the film, and it left people wondering, and to this day, I wonder, are there going to be people that find this film someplace? Has he ever left a copy of it somewhere, just so that, it ends up in the hands of the authorities, maybe by Charlie Sheen or something like that. But I think it fits in as probably a new sense of horror. I think it's very important. I think it's integral to the genre on the whole. I think it's going to be one of the films that people look back on and realize that's where underground horror movies changed forever. That's where independent horror films took a completely different direction. That's where film once again became scary, became threatening, became frightening. Its ability to make you believe that this is actually taking place. Its ability to remove itself from basic filmmaking. I mean, when you go into a horror film, you're going into a horror film. When you go into August Underground, you're going into a very, very, very real world. And it's that element, and it was Fred's ability to portray that so so true to life that I think that's what puts it leagues above a lot of the other independent stuff that you see, which is pretty much, a lot of it's kind of just silly now. You know, people are trying to just do like parodies and goofy kind of things and make it kind of schlock for schlock's sake. August Underground is a very threatening film. I would absolutely say that Fred's probably the most dangerous filmmaker right now in the history of where we're going with horror. He's probably the most dangerous man on the list. I have complete faith in the fact that August Underground is going to take horror in a new direction. It's going to bring it back to a level of, you know, again, using the term threatening. It works. That's the whole thing. Is, you know, we're so hard to be reached nowadays because we've seen it all. I mean, it's all been shoved in our face, but not that. You know, like that hasn't. And so it's just yeah. Every scene of brutality was probably borderline too much for me, but that's the point. That's why I love the film so much. There's not many films that I can say that about. So I think, you know, that is saying a lot. Because I'm telling you, big G.G. Allen fan, I've seen some horrible stuff in my life. I've watched videos that, wow, like you just don't come back from. But watching August Underground, every scene of brutality was on the fringe of being just too much, which I love him for it. You know, it was it's great. Yeah, I have a story. She was my fiance at the time. She's a wife now, and she made it through about the first 2 or 3 minutes, and absolutely afterwards, she left the room. She came back in the middle. Saw a little bit more of the film and looked me right in my eyes and said, I don't know if I want to marry you. But she did.
A lot of like independent films are just always, get your hopes up and they're just always so, you know, they don't live up to expectations. They're always so disappointing and so poorly made and stuff. And within the first 5 minutes of August Underground, you're watching it and then you lean over and you're watching it, and you just get sucked into it immediately. Immediately get sucked into that film. When it was over, it really sticks with you, and you think about it, and you think about it, and you're just like, you know what, that was a really good movie. It really had an impact on me, and it's something that you're going to remember after you see it. It's not going to be like, yeah, that was cool, and go about your business. You think about it, and you want to see it again. August Underground is important in the horror genre, the fact that it shows you what what's capable of being done. You know, you think you've seen it all, you've been there, but you see stuff like August Underground, and you know what? You haven't. You know, it really shows you the potential of what can still be done in the horror genre. In 50 years, you know what? August Underground have probably spouted a whole new genre of films just like it being imitated. It's definitely like one of those pioneer films that, like, yeah, well, blah, blah, blah. Well, August Underground was the first. It'll be like the Black Sabbath of filth. It stands out so far ahead. Other independent horror films, you know, it's like they have no confidence in themselves, and they think they're like, oh, I'm a director, and blah, blah, blah. But they really don't have enough confidence to make a good movie, so they kind of cheapen it up and try to put jokes in it, or like, you know, tits for tits' sake and stuff like that. Where August Underground, it had so much confidence, and it wasn't trying to like, oh, I can't make a good movie, so I can't make it scary, so I'll have to make people laugh. You know, it wasn't like a schlocky type film. It was taken totally seriously, and that's one of the reasons why it was so effective. So, you know, became friends with all the toe tag and stuff, going to conventions, and we're at this one convention. I had a friend of mine helping me. I'm introducing them to toe tag, like, oh, you know, these guys are toe tag, friend, blah, blah, blah. So he's back at my house, like, you know, a few weeks later. And I was like, oh, you know, I got this August Underground movie from those guys from Toe Tag. He's never seen it. I was like, oh, you should check this out. You know? So we're sitting down watching. He's like, oh my God. Oh my God. It's like, oh. So it's like, you could probably get away with, like, you know, not telling anybody what it is and convince him it's a totally real film. It's like a real snuff film going on. But he's like, so, like, the funny part is, he's like, next time I see them at a convention, I am not taking their hand or nothing.
It was so realistic that you could actually smell the shit they were waiting in while you were watching it. Like when Fredstein was puking in the bathtub, I mean, you know, it just seemed very real. It was very well done, and I thought the people who did it were sick. And I've known sick people and I've watched sick things, but it was really, really out there. One of the things I do at Synapse is I'm pretty much the first person that watches the submissions, and if I like something a lot, I pass it on to Don. If he likes it, you know, we do it. So I see a ton of independent stuff, shot on video, some shot on film, and it's strictly, it's a standalone. There's nothing like it. I think there's people out there like that, although I know that the people who made it definitely aren't. Like I said, they're the nicest bunch of people I've ever come across in this line of work. But the frightening thing is I believe there are people out there who are like that. So, to me, August Underground is more of an art piece than a film. There's no linear storyline, really, you know, as far as I could tell. So it's a standalone. It's something different. I don't think it's, you know, in my opinion, it's not part of that. It's its own thing. It needs its own category.
The first time I saw it, well, truthfully, I got about 5 minutes into it and started really just kind of freaking out. Not totally, but I started thinking, you know what, this is a little bit out there. And I looked around the room, because there were probably 20 of us in there, just sweating. It was hot, we're piled in. And I started thinking, I saw Krusty and Shelby sitting there, I started thinking, what if this is them? What if they're just totally just getting off on, this is real. We're watching what they really fucking did to these people, and they're getting off on it, and when it's over, a couple of us are going to hang around and they're going to fucking kill us, record it, and that's the next fucking movie. Honestly, I was kind of freaked out. I'm like, fuck, somebody's going to be dead. Wasn't what I thought it was going to be, but that was cool. So many times there's the, you know, kind of shot that way that makes it look like it's a home, you know, home video type thing. It just sucks. But it took it to a completely different fucking level. When the film was over, silence. It was just stunned silence of what the fuck did I just watch? You know, what, Jesus Christ. And then my next thing was to smash the window out and jump. And just get the fuck out, because somebody was dying. I knew it. I just knew it. You know, it's the quality of the gore. The effects are great. The vulgarity. Just, you know, it's just different. It's hard to describe, but it's just 5 minutes into it, like we talked before, you just know it's something different than everything else. It's raw. It offends me, but I want to be offended. I think you should be offended. I think it can keep pushing the envelope, and that's what needs to happen. I mean, it's up to, I expect all independent filmmakers to just keep pushing shit. You know, there should be no cutoff, there should be no level. Individually, I have a level that I wouldn't cross, but it's up to me to decide that level, not someone else. And I hope you guys just keep kicking that fucking level up higher and higher. I think horror in the last, you know, since the 90s has needed a good kick in the ass. Everything's mainstream, everything's teeny boppers. The sickness needed to come back. And I'm hoping that it does. It leads the way for a lot more.
One, these guys have done something that I would consider a throwback without ever realizing they did it. And two, I wonder what's next. It's a throwback to guerrilla filmmaking without truly being guerrilla filmmaking. I mean, they have sparse, you know, I know the crew is sparse and the films are made on the cheap, but you know, people have always done it. It's just a throwback to me of the 60s and 70s stuff that got me all going in this in the first place. I think August Underground fits under the slimy rock, where nobody actually sees it, but they need to use it as a stepping stone to get up a slippery slope. It's not for everybody. It's definitely an acquired taste, but there's enough people out there that need to find it and need to discover it. I think August Underground is just something that needed to be when filmmaking basically got blasé and Hollywood turns out turds. I mean, it was just a kick in the balls at the right time, at the right moment, a lot like the 80s video boom was, and the people who used that for a lot of the similar stuff. I think that August Underground is actually doing something that needs to be done, and it's something we haven't seen since the late 60s and early 70s after the Vietnam War. Right now is an ugly time in America. We have an alcoholic monkey as our unelected leader, and it's just a ripe time for the late 60s to be reborn without the shittiness of hippie assholes.
When I first saw an H.G. Lewis film, it changed my life, Herschel Gordon, and just because it was just so fucking extreme. And it's just rare things like that come around once in a lifetime. And then it was shocking, and the H.G. Lewis stuff was shocking, it was shocking, but it wasn't like as fucked up as what Fred's doing. He's just taking it to a lower level, but on a higher level at the same time. Fucking guy's crazy, dude. It was great. It's like, not that I've ever seen a real snuff film, nor do I, ever want to see one. I'd like to be in one, but it was great. It was just dirty. You want to take a fucking shower after watching it. The chick's nipples, man. The special effects with that cut off nipple, fucking great. And it had a lot of stuff to do with poop, and poop is funny. Poop is funny. Eating poop, wiping poop. It fits right into horror. It fits in with like Wes Craven's Last House on the Left, which isn't like a monster Dracula, film. It's just sleazy and it's horrific, but it's twisted. What makes it stand out is the realism factor of it. It's like is this a movie? What's going on? It's just like a videotape found somewhere. It's just a dirty feeling. Like a dirty, creepy feeling. It's just like, oh, they're not gonna do that. What the fuck? And it's good. It makes you feel shit.
August was of its own kind. August was a different thing of its own kind. And you gotta appreciate that, man, because this is a new future of horror, man. This is a new future of horror. One Saturday night, I went to have some popcorn in my late night feature. I said, I'm gonna pop it in. I said, impress me. I put it on, I said, okay, and it showed them going downstairs with that girl with her nipple hacked off and everything. It was like, whoa, man, it's getting hot in here. Well, I made it about 15 minutes. 15 minutes, man. And I checked the air conditioning, and I had to go take a shower, man, a cold one. I think it fits into horror as the Citizen Kane. It's extreme. It's extreme horror because this stuff can really happen. I mean, it's like what Fred says in the magazine Rue Morgue. It could happen at your PTA meetings. It could happen at your boss at where I work. I don't know if somebody's gonna do that to me. You cannot trust a fucking soul these days. I mean, people are ruthless, and this stuff is realistic. He wants to show you something realistic, and this is real, pal. People do this. This ain't somebody getting up and being shot like 6 times and getting up and say, I'm back again. This is realistic. It is real. Fred has a temper in that movie, man. I mean, he uses, it's intense, man. That's life. Life is cruel. Like Dario Argento said, life is cruel. And Fred shows that in his picture, man. Fred shows the barbarically, the savagery, the brutality, and the bloodshed in that movie, man. I mean, and the special effects, man, you're not going to see that anywhere else. You know, why is when I try to get horror movies anymore, I buy the new stuff. It sucks. Nobody can compare to what Toe Tag and Fred does. No one can compare to what they do. No one, period. Most independent films are basically, oh, okay, on the minute. Yeah, I've seen that movie, The Last Horror Film. It's a piece of shit. Nobody can compare to that. I mean that movie blows. I called Fred up. I said, Fred, you have nothing to worry about. Nothing at all. This movie sucks. If this guy sees this, yeah, your movie sucks. I don't care about that film. I don't like it. I'm surprised that Fango tried to copy that. I don't like that. August Underground is the real deal. People are scared of it. People are scared of it. Well, it's a horror film. You're supposed to be scared. But don't censor it. Because welcome it. Because this is a new thing of horror. Don't just try to ban it. Maybe make it controversial, yeah, but don't try to ban it. Review it. It makes you think. Maybe it might make you take a shower. Maybe it might make you have a stomach ache. Maybe it might make you throw up. It's supposed to do that. Real life things like that do make you throw up. What's worse is the evening news. Why don't you censor the evening news? Get August Underground up there, it's fake. But it's realistic. It's brutal. August Underground is setting the change. We need change in this horror industry. We're sick of PG-13 movies and remakes and all that bullshit. I don't want to see a remake. I don't know about anybody else, but I think August Underground 50 years is going to be say, hey, look, just like the original Chainsaw. Man, look what this did, back in 2000. Look what this did, man. Finally, someone has got the balls to do some good, decent horror, and I hope this guy makes some more of these films because we need him. We need people like this. We need more people like this to make more brutal fucking horror like this. We need more. We need it more to throw it in their face. We need people that are not going to back down to these stupid censorships and not back down to these fundamentalist idiots and make some things, change the face of horror, put a dent into it. Make another dent like they did in the 70s, in the 80s. Make a dent. Bring it back. Bring it back to like the Gore Zone days. Bring it back.
I found out about it from a guy who owns a video store in Pittsburgh, and he'd asked me because he knows that I'm into more extreme, more disturbing types of films, and he told me to look out for these movies, the August Underground series of films. But at that time, Mortem wasn't out; it was just August Underground. The first time I watched it, I actually watched it by myself. For the first time, I was alone, and it really disturbed me. Actually, I got about 20 minutes into the movie, and I had to switch it off. My wife had come home, and I ran to the door, and I was so happy to see her because the movie is so it's oppressive, and so I ran to the door and I hugged my wife. I said, I'm glad to see you because this movie was flipping me out. But yeah, it really draws you into its seedy world. It really it feels like the real thing. The opening scene really it really shocked me just because you've got all these. You've got, first of all, you got this girl tied up in a chair, tied up with duct tape. You've got these pictures of pornography behind her on the walls. You've got just all kinds of garbage on the floor. There's a bucket next to her. Shit on the floor. Everything else is just insane. And it wasn't that it was necessarily, wasn't really that it was necessarily violent. It was more just the visuals of everything. there's no real, you're not actually seeing any real gore in the beginning. You just see this girl tied up to the chair. You see the pornography on the walls, just trashy, scummy basement, shit on the floor. That is disturbing, whether or not there's gore involved. Just that image is shocking. You know, first of all, you have the pseudo snuff look and feel, and I mean everything is so real about it. It's not. It has a really unique narrative. It doesn't really have a beginning, middle, and end. It just is just chunks of these two killers' life, and it just doesn't really fit in with the rest of the typical independent films, especially the other types of films that are shot on video that you see nowadays. August Underground fits into the darkest corner of the most disturbing, just oppressive film. I've never watched it with friends. I don't know if I could handle watching it with friends. I've told friends about it, I've recommended it to friends, but it's such a strange experience. It's kind of, it's almost too personal to watch with other people.
My name is Logan Tallman. I am the director of Hammer to the Head, a deeper look at August Underground. I stumbled upon August Underground about a year and a half, 2 years ago, in an article in Ultraviolet magazine called My First Rape. I've been a horror fan ever since I was a little kid, so I had to see August Underground when I heard how brutal, how it was pushing the limits, how extreme it was. So I tracked down a bootleg copy, and the first time I watched it, I got about 10-15 minutes into the film before I had to turn it off. I went and ate a sandwich, had a drink, came back, you know, I was very affected by it. I watched it a little bit later that day with my girlfriend, who's a huge horror film fan. She was, you know, affected by it. So, I mean, I couldn't get August Underground out of my head. 2 weeks later, it was still in my head. I showed it to everybody I could. I tried to track down the filmmakers. I finally tracked down Fred Vogel, you know, talked to him a little bit through email, and I had to, you know, I had to dive deeper into August Underground and find out, was it real? Were people actually hurt? Was it all just a hoax? So here I am. Fred Vogel's let me stay at his house throughout this process of making the documentary, and you know, I think we've really grown close. And tonight they're gonna let me into the world that is August Underground and show me how they actually film a scene. So that's gonna be it.
You better settle down, motherfucker. You hear me? If you don't fucking settle down, you're gonna be in more pain. Why'd you give me this one, huh?
Because he's a big one.
Look out! Shut the fuck up. Huh? Stop giving me trouble.
Oh.
Look at you fucked up the blood. Look what you did.
That's not supposed to look like that, buddy.
We're gonna have to fix that. We're gonna need some more blood here. Looks like you're gonna have to bleed again.
Hey, I got an idea.
You did this to yourself, you know this, huh?
Look at it!
It's gonna hurt.
Open your eyes and fucking look at it.
Come on. You're gonna hurt yourself. Hey, quit moving around. Stop. Stop moving around.
Oh, this is fucking hot.
Quit. You like this, baby?
I do.
Mark's spot. Stop it. You're gonna hurt.
That's where I want you to cut them. That's where I want you to fucking cut them.
Right there?
Yeah.
Nice little tender spot right there.
All right.
Wanna play with them? Can't touch the camera now.
I know.
Come back over here. Turn back here. Sit there for a minute, alright?
How do you feel, sir? Does
You're
this
gonna
feel
fall
fun? You having a good time? Is this what you came here for? This is what you came here for, huh, pal? You wanted to meet us.
Who the fuck in their right mind finds this shit and wants to meet us? You're gonna be feeling this. And I cut me off a second. Right there? Huh?
I say cut him. I say
Over
cut him.
here! Show me where you want me to cut him. Stay fucking still!
Get on the fucking table.
Still!
Cut his fucking throat. Cut his fucking throat. Cut his fucking throat.
Motherfucker, don't bite me.
Who the fuck do you think you fucking are, meatball? Ha!
Stop! Stop moving! There, you little bitch. Right fucking there.
Yeah.
Could you turn that fucking thing off and help me?
All right, hang on a second. Hang on a second.